When Emmanuel Haro's parents were arrested, the world thought the case was over. A tragic ending. A baby gone. The community mourned, investigators moved in, and the parents, Rebecca and Jake, were branded guilty in the court of public opinion. Their silence screamed louder than words. Their handcuffs looked like closure. But now, everything has changed. A secret recording has surfaced, and on that tape, a baby's voice is heard. Crying. Alive. After the very day investigators marked Emmanuel as dead. Let that sink in. The parents were marched into court. The world wrote Emmanuel's obituary, and yet a voice whispers from the shadows, defying the official story. So the question is no longer just, did Rebecca and Jake kill their child? The question is, why were we told Emmanuel was dead, if his cries still echo somewhere out there? Was it a cover-up, a staged abduction, a desperate attempt to erase the truth? Or has this child been hidden away, silenced not by death, but by design? Tonight we aren't chasing rumors. We are chasing verified leads, forensic analysis, and the gaps authorities don't want you to see. Because if Emmanuel's voice is real, then his silence today isn't natural. It's enforced. And every second of quiet is a second that someone somewhere keeps him from the world. This isn't just about a case. This is about a fight. And DetectiveMax is here to stay. We will not be quiet. We will not back down. Because silence is how cases die. And silence is exactly what whoever hid Emmanuel is counting on. This is a movement for truth. And every single subscriber is part of that fight. One voice alone can be ignored, but thousands of voices demanding justice. That's how we put pressure on the system. That's how we force answers. That's how we become the voice these victims never had. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. Because every view, every comment, every subscriber is a stand against silence, and a step toward justice for those who cannot fight for themselves. We've just crossed 5,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 6,000, then 7,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button, and where you watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. The flashing of red and blue lights against the small suburban home was not just an arrest, it was a declaration. The police had made their move. Rebecca and Jake Haro, the parents of baby Emmanuel, were led out in handcuffs, their heads bowed, their futures collapsing under the weight of suspicion. And the world watched. Rebecca's face told a story of its own. Her lips trembled as if words wanted to spill out, but none came. Fear, regret, guilt. No one could say for sure. Her cries before Emmanuel's disappearance, those haunting warnings, suddenly felt prophetic, as though she had known, and no one listened. And Jake, he was different. Stiff, stone-faced. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't fight. He walked into the flashing lights, as if he already knew this day was coming. His silence was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of someone holding secrets. Someone who believed his lips sealed were stronger than any truth that might emerge. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalks. Phones came up. Social feeds exploded. This wasn't just an arrest. It was a spectacle. And yet, beneath the noise, one question echoed louder than the rest. Were these parents carrying a truth darker than anyone imagined? The community was torn. To some, Rebecca was a broken mother, trapped in circumstances bigger than herself. To others, she was complicit. Her cries nothing more than an act. And Jake, his coldness, his refusal to speak, became the perfect canvas for guilt. Together, they painted the picture of parents hiding something monstrous. But here's the thing. Arrests are not convictions, and silence doesn't always equal guilt. What if the story wasn't as final as the handcuffs suggested? What if Emmanuel's case was never about death at all? Because hidden in the shadows of this moment, buried beneath the flashing lights and the headlines, was a truth waiting to explode. A secret that would shatter everything we thought we knew. A recording, a voice, a heartbeat in the dark. Proof that Emmanuel Haro may not be dead at all. The first time Rebecca and Jake Haro stood before the judge, the atmosphere inside that courtroom was suffocating. No jury, no testimony. Just two parents, accused, scrutinized, dissected not just by the law, but by the public's gaze. Every movement, every twitch, every glance, was evidence in the eyes of those watching. Rebecca's hands shook as she clutched the table, her knuckles white. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, never holding still long enough to meet anyone else's stare. When she did look up, it wasn't at the judge, or the gallery, or even her own attorney. It was at the floor, downward, retreating, as if she knew the truth, but couldn't bear to face it. And then there was Jake, detached, unbothered. He didn't shift in his chair. He didn't flinch when charges were read aloud. His eyes remained fixed on the wall ahead, cold and distant, as though this wasn't happening to him at all. Some in the gallery whispered that his calmness was unnatural. Others said it was arrogance, the quiet confidence of someone convinced that no one could ever prove what he had done. The contrast between the two was striking. Rebecca, fragile, jittery, and on the verge of breaking. Jake, stone, unreadable, the kind of man whose silence feels louder than screams. Together they presented the most haunting question. Did they know something about Emmanuel's fate all along? Because guilt isn't always spoken. Sometimes it leaks through the smallest cracks. An avoided glance, a clenched jaw, a silence that stretches too long. And in this courtroom, guilt was on display, not in the words exchanged, but in the body language that screamed louder than testimony ever could. But here's where the story fractures. Just as the world was ready to brand them as guilty parents, a secret began to stir, a piece of evidence so unexpected. It threatened to flip everything upside down. A voice recording, a whisper in the dark, proof that maybe, just maybe, Emmanuel Haro is alive. Just when the case against Rebecca and Jake Haro seemed sealed in the public's mind, when guilt was almost written into stone, everything shattered. Investigators uncovered something that changed the entire trajectory of the investigation. A secret audio recording, hidden, buried, and when played, it left even seasoned detectives frozen in disbelief. The tape begins faintly, the sound of static, a shuffle-like movement in the dark, and then a cry. Not just any cry, but the distinct sound of a baby's wail, a small, fragile voice, resembling Emmanuel's piercing through the silence. It was alive. He was alive. And here's the detail that shook the timeline to its core, the timestamp. This recording wasn't from before his disappearance. It wasn't from the night he went missing. No, this was captured after the world was told Emmanuel was gone. The contradiction is almost unbearable. If Emmanuel was alive, if that cry echoed after his disappearance date, then why did his parents act as though he was lost forever? Why the silence from Jake? Why the breakdown from Rebecca? Why stand in court with faces heavy with guilt, when the truth might be far more chilling, that they knew exactly where Emmanuel was? The recording forces us to ask, were the parents staging grief to hide something darker? Was this a game of misdirection, fooling the public, fooling investigators, and maybe even fooling themselves? Or could it be proof that Emmanuel's disappearance wasn't a tragedy, but a cover-up? Because if this recording is real, if Emmanuel was alive beyond the date of his declared disappearance, then everything we've been told collapses. The narrative, the courtroom drama, the guilt on display, all of it must be re-examined. And the one question that rises above the rest, why hide a living child? When a recording of this magnitude surfaces, law enforcement cannot afford to take it at face value. Enter the specialists, the forensic audio examiners, experts trained to pull truth from sound. Their job isn't just to listen, but to analyze every wave, every pause, every echo. The first step is waveform analysis. Technicians map the sound visually, breaking down the frequencies of Emmanuel's supposed cry. They're looking for natural patterns, the unique pitch of a child's voice, and any signs of digital manipulation. If it were edited, the inconsistencies would show. If it were fabricated, the fingerprints of tampering would be clear. Then the background noise comes under the microscope. Every hum, every buzz, every faint shuffle tells a story. Was the recording taken indoors, outdoors? Was there a car engine humming in the distance? A television? A clock ticking? These details help investigators place the moment in a real-world setting. Sometimes a single background sound can pinpoint location or expose a lie. Next, timestamping. Digital files leave behind a trail, metadata that reveals when, where, and sometimes even on what device the recording was made. But here's the twist. The file didn't surface through an official release, which raises two chilling questions. Did this leak come from inside law enforcement itself, or was it passed on by a whistleblower who believed the truth was being buried? And here's where the weight of it all crashes down. If this cry is Emmanuel's, if forensic testing confirms it's genuine, then we are staring down the most terrifying possibility, that someone somewhere wanted the world to believe this child was dead. That silence wasn't accidental. It was orchestrated. But why? To shield someone from justice, to protect an unthinkable secret, or to keep Emmanuel hidden until the time was right. To truly grasp the weight of this secret recording, we have to go back to Rebecca, the mother at the center of this storm. She was the first voice that cried out. Her tears, her frantic words, in the early hours after Emmanuel vanished. Those moments framed this case from the very beginning. But over time, her story shifted. Her once loud pleas dulled into silence. Statements changed. Cooperation with investigators dried up. And then nothing. But what if Rebecca's silence wasn't just guilt? What if it was fear? This recording, the sound of a living Emmanuel after he was declared gone, reframes everything she ever said. Could it be that she wasn't delusional when she claimed Emmanuel was still out there? Could it be that her contradictions weren't confusion, but suppression? A woman who knew too much, pressured into silence. Still, silence has a cost. If Rebecca knew Emmanuel was alive, why did her voice vanish when he needed it the most? Why did her fight for him stop right when the world was ready to write him off as dead? Was it loyalty to someone, fear of retaliation, or the unbearable weight of a truth too dark to carry? Here lies the shadow of Rebecca, part mother, part mystery. Was she protecting Emmanuel, or protecting herself? Was she misled into believing silence would save him? Or was she complicit in the cover-up of her own child's fate? This is where the guilt becomes unbearable, not for her alone, but for us as a society. How many chances were there to listen, to act, to pull the truth from her words, before the silence swallowed them? And if this recording is real, it forces us to confront the possibility that Emmanuel's faint cry was ignored, not just by a mother, but by everyone who should have fought for him. If Rebecca's cries painted the early picture of this case, then Jake's silence completed it. From the very beginning, his presence was marked not by words, but by an absence of them. A father who refused interviews, a man whose public image was shaped less by what he said, and more by what he wouldn't. Behind that silence, though, lies a troubling history, anger, secrecy, a temper that neighbors whispered about. And now, with this secret recording of Emmanuel alive surfacing, Jake's refusal to speak takes on a darker edge. Was he silent because he was guilty, or because he was guarding a secret he couldn't risk revealing? In detective work, silence is rarely neutral. It is either a shield or a confession. And Jake's silence, stacked against Rebecca's shifting cries, feels almost calculated. He stood firm as her story unraveled, but never offered his own. He hid behind attorneys, behind statements of threat and harassment, behind walls that only deepened suspicion. But here's where it gets chilling. This recording changes everything. If Emmanuel was alive after the disappearance, Jake's silence now screams louder than Rebecca's tears. It's no longer just about a father who wouldn't talk. It's about a father who may have chosen silence over truth, silence over justice, silence over his own child's life. So we are left with this burning question. Did Jake have something to hide, or something to protect? And if it was the latter, who or what was he protecting at Emmanuel's expense? The moment the recording surfaced, the case of Emmanuel Haro shifted from tragedy to mystery. Suddenly, investigators, journalists, and the public were no longer asking, "What happened to Emmanuel?" They were asking, how could he still be alive? And with that, theories began to explode. First, what if Emmanuel was deliberately hidden? Think about it. A baby declared gone, parents arrested, the community grieving, and all the while, Emmanuel's cries echoing in some hidden room, some forgotten safe house. If true, this isn't just a failure of investigation, it's a conspiracy of silence. Second, the darkest theory, that Emmanuel's so-called death was staged. A performance to cover up something deeper. Abuse, neglect, or worse, trafficking. In this scenario, the recording isn't a miracle. It's evidence. Evidence that Emmanuel wasn't dead, just transferred, traded or hidden away, until it was too late to recover him. And then comes the third scenario, the one that makes every investigator lean closer. What if someone close to the family knew the truth and recorded proof? A whistleblower, a friend, a relative who couldn't stomach the lies anymore. The kind of person who risks everything to put truth on tape. But no matter which theory you follow, all roads lead to the same haunting question. If Emmanuel is alive, where is he? And who is keeping him hidden? Because one thing is clear. Silence doesn't just cover guilt, it buries the innocent. And Emmanuel's cries, caught forever in that recording, may be the only chance he has left to be heard. The moment that recording surfaced, the spotlight shifted. For weeks the narrative was simple. Emmanuel was gone, his parents were guilty, and the community needed closure. But now, that story no longer holds. Suddenly the people meant to bring truth, the investigators, the officers, the prosecutors, are the ones being questioned. Law enforcement is under intense pressure, not from rumors, not from wild conspiracy theories, but from a single undeniable fact. A voice, a child's cry, a recording that should not exist, but does. A recording that appears to prove Emmanuel Haro was still alive, after the date authorities told us he was dead. And so the questions cut deeper. Did investigators dismiss vital evidence too quickly? Were there signs overlooked, buried or ignored, that Emmanuel's story wasn't finished? Or worse, did they choose the neatest version of events, closing in on the parents, because it was the simplest explanation? Rebecca's pleas were called unstable. Jake's silence was labeled suspicious. But what if those cries and silences were fragments of a larger truth, one law enforcement never wanted to unravel? Because now this recording forces us to ask, was this a botched investigation, or something more dangerous? Did those tasked with finding Emmanuel actually silence the trail that could have saved him? The community is erupting. Protests outside the courthouse, online petitions demanding accountability, hashtags flooding social media, #Justice for Emmanuel, #Where is Emmanuel? Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors are now shouting in the streets. How do you declare a baby dead when his voice is caught on tape, alive? This isn't just outrage, it's betrayal. Because when a community loses trust in its investigators, it doesn't just lose faith in one case, it loses faith in the entire system. And now law enforcement faces a storm they cannot silence. A storm that demands only one answer. Where is Emmanuel Haro? And if he is alive, why did you tell us he was gone? The moment the secret recording surfaced, everything changed. For weeks, the disappearance of Emmanuel Haro felt like it was fading into silence. Another heartbreaking case that people whispered about but no longer believed would see resolution. But then came that sound, a baby's cry, faint but unmistakable. A sound that defied the official story. A sound that tore through the carefully built narrative of death and finality. Social media didn't just react, it erupted. Within minutes of the leak, Twitter exploded with the hashtag #JusticeForEmmanuel. TikTok creators posted breakdowns of the audio, comparing wavelengths, amplifying background noises, and speculating on what could be heard in the distance. A clock, a car, a voice. Facebook groups with thousands of members reignited, each user adding their own theory, their own suspicions. Some claimed they always believed something wasn't right. Others admitted they doubted the case entirely. But now they demanded answers. Local neighbors, once reluctant to speak, began to step into the spotlight. One woman swore she heard crying in the middle of the night, long after Emmanuel had supposedly vanished. Another neighbor admitted they saw suspicious movement near the Haro home weeks later, but brushed it off as paranoia. And suddenly whispers that were once dismissed as gossip transformed into potential evidence. The recording had awakened a buried guilt within the community. Did they ignore the signs? Did they fail Emmanuel by staying quiet? The media wasted no time. By morning, national headlines flashed across screens. Is the Haro baby alive? Major outlets rolled out special segments, inviting psychologists, audio engineers, and criminologists to weigh in. News anchors played the tape on repeat, their voices heavy with the same chilling question. If Emmanuel is alive, why did his parents act as though he was dead? On talk shows, analysts dissected the parents' courtroom demeanor, the inconsistencies in their statements, and the sheer impossibility of a baby's voice appearing after a declared disappearance. And then came the divide. For some, this was undeniable proof that Rebecca and Jake Haro were guilty of something far darker than anyone had imagined. They saw the recording as evidence of a staged tragedy, a cruel deception designed to hide abuse, trafficking, or even murder gone wrong. The parents in this theory weren't victims of circumstance, they were orchestrators of a lie. But others refused to accept that conclusion. To them, the recording was a cry for help, not from guilty parents, but from a baby who was still alive, hidden, perhaps in danger, and possibly controlled by forces far larger than the Haro family. Maybe Emmanuel wasn't dead. Maybe he was taken. Maybe the truth was buried under layers of silence, fear, and deliberate misdirection. The split became a storm. Protesters began gathering outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Bring Emmanuel home." Community vigils reignited, this time not in memory of a lost child, but in hope of a living one. The air buzzed with urgency. For the first time, the case wasn't just about mourning, it was about saving. And the haunting question grew louder, with every passing day. If Emmanuel is alive, where is he? Who is keeping him hidden? And why would anyone want the world to believe that he was gone forever? I'm stepping in as Detective Max now, not to dramatize this, but to strip it to logic. The timeline clean and cold. Arrest, parents in cuffs, public narrative hardens, case closed in everything but paperwork. Recording a leak surfaces. An infant's cry, time stamped after the declared disappearance. Contradictions, Rebecca's story shifts, then stalls. Jake stays silent behind counsel. Public grief becomes public doubt. What the evidence says, and what it refuses to say. We have no confirmed recovery of a body, no verified remains, no definitive forensic proof of death. We have audio that appears post-disappearance, but we lack full chain of custody and metadata authentication made public. We have behavioral red flags, silence, shifting statements, but behavior is context, not proof. We have searches and warrants, yet no location tied to that voice with certainty. Forensic gaps I'd close next. Authenticate the file. Original device. Unbroken chain. File hash. Edit history. Background noise triangulation. Isolate hums. Traffic patterns. Appliance signatures. Compare to known locations. Geofence plus tower data around the recording's likely window. Cross-match with movements of anyone in the child's circle. Doorbell CCTV audio pulls within a half-mile radius. Run spectral matches for the same ambient depth. Probabilistic voice comparison to Emmanuel's prior medical or home clips, if any, with a clear margin of uncertainty stated. The logical fork. If the recording is fabricated, someone engineered a cruel diversion. If it's authentic, the case flips. The question isn't who killed Emmanuel, it's who's hiding him. So here is the line I won't soften. If this recording is real, then law enforcement isn't chasing a body. They're chasing a hidden child. If Emmanuel's voice can still be heard on that recording, then his silence today is not natural. It's not accidental. It's enforced. Someone somewhere is making sure we don't hear him again. And that single fact should shake us to our core. Because what does it mean when a baby declared gone forever is suddenly heard alive, crying in the shadows? It means the official story was broken. It means someone, whether a parent, an accomplice, or even an institution, wanted us to believe Emmanuel Haro was dead when he was not. That truth should make us uncomfortable.
It should make us angry. But above all, it should make us refuse silence. And here is where the guilt lies. Not just with the parents who sit in silence. Not just with the officials who may have moved too quickly, but with all of us. Every time we shrug off Emmanuel's name, every time we scroll past without sharing his story, we risk becoming part of the silence that keeps him hidden. Every second of silence is a gift to whoever is hiding him. Every unanswered question is a weapon in their hands. This is why DetectiveMax exists. Not for clicks, not for fleeting views, but because justice is too easily buried under noise, lies, and indifference. If Emmanuel is out there, alive, frightened, silenced, then our voices are the only weapon he has left. So here is my vow to you. DetectiveMax will not stop. We will not grow quiet. We will not let Emmanuel Haro's name fade. Because fading is exactly what those responsible are counting on. And now I turn it to you. If you believe Emmanuel deserves justice, if you believe no child's cries should ever be hidden in the dark, then join this fight. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Add your voice to the thousands demanding the truth. Because together we are louder than silence. Together we are stronger than lies. Together we can make sure Emmanuel is not forgotten. And until the day truth is uncovered, DetectiveMax is here to stay. We fight till the end.